A little girl was playing in her front yard one morning. Her father, a trained law enforcement officer, jogged down the road and came back less than an hour later to find her gone. No footprints. No fibers. No blood. No broken twigs. Nothing. Just a plastic toy truck tipped on its side in the wet grass, and a silence so heavy it would take 3 years to lift. What happened to Emma Gibson in those 45 minutes would become one of the most quietly disturbing cases Douglas County had ever seen. And the answer, when it finally came, did not come from a detective, or a search dog, or a forensic lab. It came from a child. Trembling. Careful. And 3 years too late. If this story already has your full attention, hit that like button right now, subscribe to Cold Case YTJ, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a cold case like this one. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you already have a feeling about where this is going? Because I promise you, this case gets darker before it gets anywhere close to the truth. Elia, Oregon. A town that once lived by logging and quietly learned to live without it. Nestled into the hills of Douglas County, it is the kind of place where neighbors wave from their driveways without always knowing each other's last names, and where bad news travels faster than any phone call ever could. March 1998. The Gibson family woke to one of those ordinary Tuesday mornings, the kind that never announce what they are about to take from you. Their home sat at the end of a gravel road. A single-story house with a small fenced yard and a swing that leaned slightly to one side, as if it had always carried more weight than it was built to hold. Nothing about this property would have made you look twice. Nothing here would have made you feel afraid. Larry Gibson was 34 years old. A deputy sheriff with Douglas County. The kind of man his colleagues described in one word: steady. Clean-cut. Serious. Dependable. The kind of officer you wanted working a difficult crime scene precisely because he did not rattle. He led a Boy Scout troop on weekends. He ran to keep sharp. And even on his days off, he carried his service pistol holstered at his hip. Old habits from years inside the uniform. His wife, Judith, kept the household moving. Their 2 daughters filled the house with its noise and its color. 7-year-old Karen and 2-year-old Emma, blonde curls, bright curious eyes, and a plastic toy truck she pushed across the lawn in slow, deliberate lines, as if she were drawing a map of somewhere only she could see. That morning, Judith cleaned the kitchen. Cartoons played faintly in the other room. Outside, the creek that ran behind their property murmured steadily over smooth stones. It was their familiar rhythm, the one built over years of marriage and unremarkable mornings. Larry came out to the porch, laced up his running shoes, and told Judith he would be back in an hour. Maybe less. Emma was already in the front yard. The yard was not large. Barely 20 feet deep before it met the low wooden fence at the road. But to a toddler with the whole world still ahead of her, it was an entire country to explore. The grass was still wet from morning dew, and the little girl's shoes left soft prints where she pushed her truck across the lawn. Larry leaned against the porch railing for a quiet moment, watching her. He checked the latch on the front gate carefully. He told his daughter to wait for her big sister Karen, who would be coming outside soon. Then he jogged down the gravel driveway. Emma lifted her head. Waved a small, clumsy hand, still soft with baby fat. And said something that sounded like, "Bye, Daddy." Her voice carried on the morning air like a small bell ringing once. Then Larry Gibson rounded the bend in the road. And that voice disappeared behind him. Half a mile down the quiet road, Larry saw movement near the drainage ditch. A gray cat. The same animal he immediately recognized from a neighbor's property down the way. The same cat that had been tearing apart his garbage cans for weeks, scattering trash across his driveway. He had complained to the neighbors more than once. He had called the county humane society. Nobody ever came this far out into the country for a stray. Larry slowed his pace. He drew his .45 caliber Colt pistol from the leather holster at his hip. And he fired once toward the ditch where the cat crouched low. The sharp crack of the gunshot split the still morning air. A handful of crows scattered from a nearby fence post. Larry waited a few seconds, watched the underbrush, saw nothing move. He holstered the weapon calmly and kept running. A small act. Barely a second thought. A minor irritation answered and forgotten before his next breath came and went. The run took longer than planned. The road dipped down into marshy low ground, then climbed toward the ridge where the forest thickened into shadow. The air smelled of pine pitch and wet bark from recent rain. He turned back at roughly 2 miles out. By the time he reached his own driveway again, sweating lightly, breathing easy, his watch read 12:15 in the afternoon. Judith was standing on the porch. One hand raised, shading her eyes against the midday glare. Her voice reached him before he made it to the porch steps. "Larry, is she with you?" He stopped. His breathing slowed. "Who are you talking about?" "Emma. She's gone. I cannot find her anywhere." He almost did not believe her. The front yard looked exactly as it had when he left less than an hour before. The swing hung perfectly still. The plastic toy truck lay tipped on its side in the grass. The gate stood open, perhaps an inch wider than before. He called his daughter's name. Then louder. Then louder still, until his voice carried past the tree line and came back to him with nothing attached to it. He checked behind the porch steps. Inside the small storage shed. The narrow gap between the fence and the old woodpile stacked against the side of the house. Judith ran frantically along the drainage ditch, pushing through the brush, crying out her daughter's name until her voice went raw. They circled the entire property twice. Then again. When the search turned up absolutely nothing, Larry grabbed the keys to his patrol car and drove up the road, horn blaring, windows down, shouting Emma's name at every turn. He stopped at the first intersection, called out into the empty air, reversed, and came back to find Judith still standing by the porch steps, shaking, crying, her hands unable to hold still. At 12:55 that afternoon, they called the Douglas County Sheriff's Department. 2-year-old female. Last seen in front yard. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. No known medical issues. By 1:30 that afternoon, the first patrol units had pulled up the gravel drive. A volunteer firefighter arrived in his red truck. Church members followed. Neighbors. People from Larry's own Boy Scout troop. Strangers who had caught the dispatch call on their police scanners. Within 1 hour, the road was lined with parked vehicles in both directions. The sheriff's office set up a command post near the mailbox at the end of the drive. Search dogs from a regional K-9 unit were brought in first. Their handlers led the animals in slow, methodical sweeps through the front yard, then down the gravel road. The dogs caught a faint scent trail at the gate. They followed it roughly 50 yards down the road. Then lost it completely at the curve where the pavement began. As if Emma Gibson had simply ceased to exist at that curve in the road. Helicopters from the Oregon State Police swept low overhead, rotor blades kicking up dust and dead leaves. Dozens of men waded through the cold creek, combed the tall grass along the fence line, checked under porches and inside every shed they could find. The afternoon hours blurred together into a continuous motion of boots, flashlights, and shouting voices. By 4 o'clock, the official search grid stretched nearly 2 miles in every direction from the house. Neighbors checked their barns. Firefighters marked each cleared area with bright orange surveyor's tape. Not a single shoe. Not one clear footprint. Not even a broken twig to suggest which direction she had gone. As the sun dropped behind the western ridge and the temperature fell with it, hot coffee was passed around among the searchers in paper cups. Someone offered to drive Judith into town to rest. She refused. "She will come back here," Judith said quietly. She always comes back here when she is scared. Larry went inside briefly and returned wearing his full tan deputy's uniform. Badge on. Sidearm holstered. He told a colleague it felt right somehow, that he needed to look official. Needed to feel in control. Judith did not respond when he said it. Did not look at him. By 6 o'clock that evening, the sheriff called a temporary pause to the search for safety reasons. We will start again at first light, he told the assembled volunteers. We are not done. The tired volunteers nodded. One of them picked up Emma's yellow plastic toy truck from the wet grass and set it gently on the porch railing. As if keeping it safe until she came back for it. As the last vehicles pulled away down the gravel road and their engines faded into the surrounding hills, Judith stood alone on the porch with her arms crossed tight against the cold. Larry stood silently beside her. Scanning the dark yard. Watching for something, for someone, to step back into the light. Behind them, the kitchen table was still set for lunch. The sandwiches sat untouched on paper plates. The swing moved once in the evening wind, its chains creaking softly. And for a long time, neither of them spoke a single word to each other. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment right now with the words "I'm still here." Let's see who is truly following this story, because what comes next is where this case stops being just a disappearance and starts becoming something else entirely. At first light on the 19th of March, 1998, a fresh search grid was drawn across the wooded hills surrounding Azalea. Deputies from neighboring towns arrived alongside off-duty officers and volunteers from the local Mormon church congregation. Among the first to show up were members of Larry's own Boy Scout troop, teenagers in green shirts and neckerchiefs, carrying flashlights and walkie-talkies, moving through the dense brush in straight coordinated lines and calling the little girl's name as if a louder voice might somehow bring her back from wherever she had gone. By mid-morning, nearly 100 people were actively searching in organized teams. Helicopters swept low over Swamp Creek. Mounted deputies on horseback carefully worked the far muddy banks. The temperature had dropped, and fog had settled along the ridges, and every shout seemed to fade uselessly into the thick gray mist. Larry moved steadily among the searchers. Calm. Methodical. He carried a clipboard, noted search zones on a detailed map, and checked off areas as teams reported back. Those who knew him personally said he looked like a professional doing his job. Those who did not know him well found his composure strange, unsettling in a way they could not quite articulate out loud. Judith stayed close to the house. Each time a vehicle slowed near the driveway, she looked up fast, desperate for good news. None came. By noon on the second day, the sheriff personally told Judith they were expanding the search perimeter by another full mile in every direction. Larry nodded and went inside. When he came back out, he was freshly shaved and dressed in his complete tan deputy's uniform. Badge polished. Sidearm in place. No one present had ever seen a parent of a missing child do that. Deputies whispered about it when he was out of earshot. One of them wrote in his official report with carefully chosen words, "Gibson appeared unusually composed for a father in this situation. Maintains strict control but lacks normal effect. States he needs to look professional for the media coverage." The press had arrived in full force by the second day. A news crew from Portland set up near the command post. Larry stood confidently in front of the cameras and answered questions in short, clipped, controlled sentences. "We are doing everything we can. Every single minute counts in a case like this." His voice never wavered. His face showed almost no expression at all. Judith stood beside him. Pale. Shaking. Unable to find a single word. In the days that followed, the search operation spread outward like a dark stain across the map. Teams returned again and again to the same fields, the same creek beds, the same abandoned properties. They found footprints in the soft mud. None small enough to belong to a 2-year-old child. The yellow plastic toy truck remained the only physical trace of Emma Gibson that anyone ever recovered. Then the investigators began looking more closely at the timeline. Larry stated clearly that he had left the house at 11:30 that morning for his jog. A 2-mile round trip through the countryside should have taken approximately 20 minutes. He claimed he returned to the house at 12:15. Judith placed the moment she realized Emma was missing closer to 12:30. The emergency call to dispatch was logged at 12:55. That left nearly 35 minutes that no one could properly account for. Then there was the patrol car. Larry had driven his department-issued vehicle that morning, a white sheriff's sedan with the official county insignia on both doors. Highly unusual for an off-duty deputy to use his official car. The odometer showed an additional 7 miles that appeared in no duty log. When investigators asked him directly about this discrepancy, Larry explained calmly that after searching the yard, he had driven to a nearby rest area to check if Emma might have wandered that far from home. The sheriff noted it. Set it aside for the moment. But did not forget it. Then came the cat. Larry had already admitted to firing his service weapon during his run, a single shot at a stray cat near the tree line. He said he had missed. When investigators went to search the area he described, they found a dead gray cat lying in the drainage ditch approximately 50 yards from the road. 2 bullets. Both matched ballistically to Larry Gibson's department-issued .45 caliber Colt pistol. One detective later wrote in his notes, "People miss their target sometimes. People lie about small things. But rarely do both happen in the exact same story, with the physical evidence sitting right there in the ditch to prove it." By the end of March 1998, the large organized search was officially scaled back. The helicopters were grounded. Most volunteers returned to their own families. A smaller investigative team took over, quietly reviewing statements, waiting on laboratory results, and chasing every tip that came through the dedicated hotline. Dozens of possible sightings flooded in. A blonde toddler spotted at a highway rest stop. A similar child seen in a grocery store parking lot 2 counties away. Each reported sighting was investigated within hours. Each one was dismissed. Then came the statement that changed everything. 4-year-old Karen Gibson was carefully interviewed by 2 experienced child forensic detectives. Speaking in a small, quiet voice, she told them she had seen a truck pull into their driveway while her father was out jogging that morning. Inside the truck, she said, were a blonde woman and a dark-haired man she did not recognize. "They took Emma," she said. "They drove away with her." The detectives asked her gently to describe the vehicle she remembered seeing. She hesitated. "It was yellow, or maybe brownish. An older truck." She shook her head when they asked if she knew the people inside. They did not talk to her at all. They just took her sister and drove away quickly. The description was immediately released to the public. Tan or gold pickup truck, possibly older model. 2 occupants sought for questioning. The image was everywhere across Oregon, taped to store windows, broadcast on every evening newscast, printed on posters along every highway in the state. No such vehicle was ever found. Inside the Douglas County Sheriff's Department, the quiet doubts that had been circling for weeks began to take a harder shape. There were no tire tracks visible on the gravel road from that morning. No neighbors anywhere in the area who reported seeing any truck matching that description on that particular day. No corroborating evidence of any kind. But there was a 4-year-old girl who had said what she saw. And there was a father whose story had 2 bullet holes in it where he said there was only one. The truth would take 3 more years to surface. And when it finally did, it did not come from a detective. It did not come from a search dog or a forensic laboratory or a lucky tip called in from a stranger on a highway. It came from a child. Trembling. Careful. And carrying the weight of what she knew for far too long. That is where we leave Emma Gibson's story today, suspended between what was said and what was hidden, between a child's small voice and the silence of a man trained to keep his face still under pressure. If this case got under your skin the way it got under mine, Please subscribe to Cold Case YTJ right now, hit the like button, and share this with someone who loves true crime. Part 2 is coming, and that is where the silence finally breaks. Leave a comment below and tell me what you think happened on that gravel road in Elia, Oregon, on that quiet March morning in 1998. Because I read every single one. And I will see you in the next case.